Welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be taking a look at this, the brand new Fujifilm X-S10, and we're going to go through a bunch of spec. I've been out taking photos with it, doing a bit of video as well, but essentially this is kind of a nice mid-range Fujifilm camera in a pretty compact body, so a nice sort of lightweight system that you can easily carry around. The main kind of headline features, we've got a 26.1 megapixel X-Trans CMOS sensor in here, so the image quality is really nice, as you'd probably expect from a Fujifilm. We've got the X processor 4, so we've got nice fast image processing. We're going to talk a little bit about video, and of course the feel of the camera as well, with this flip out screen just like that. But first of all, probably the most important thing with any camera, let's talk a little bit about image quality. Now, this has been actually really nice to shoot with, as I generally come to expect from using a Fujifilm. I generally find using Fujifilms to be really quite pleasant, especially with all the film simulations, and this is no different at all. There's a bunch of film simulations in here, which is always fun to play around with, always gives you a slightly different creative feel to the way you're shooting, whether you shoot RAW or JPEG. Now, I shot a load of different stuff around kind of a nature park, just trying to really kind of test out the different things. Across as a film simulation is always one that I really like. I think it gives you a beautiful black and white rendition. And this camera's also got the Eterna Bleach Bypass film simulation in there as well. It gives you a kind of nice desaturated, high contrast look, which I think actually works really well for all kinds of different stuff. And it's interesting flipping through the film simulations as you go and you take photos, because they can give you a really different look, obviously, for what you're shooting, but it can change the way you want to compose the image. It can really make you think in different ways, which is what I enjoy most really about shooting with Fujifilm. I think it gives you a different experience that you don't necessarily get with other brands. And that's certainly the case here. The beauty, of course, with this camera is how small it is. It's a nice compact body, super hand holdable. I've just got it with the 18 to 55mm here, which is all I've been using with this camera. But it's just very easy to go out and just take this around. I went out with it for a couple of hours. I didn't even take a bag. I was just holding it in my hand. Like it's just not a problem at all. It's such an easy everyday camera, you know, travel, adventure photography, all kinds of stuff. And then of course you can use some prime lenses to get some really beautiful shots as well if you want to go down the portrait or landscape or anything like that kind of route. But with a zoom lens like this, a versatile lens like this, you can get some really beautiful stuff. And it's such an easy to use camera. There's also a newly developed in-body image stabilization in the camera, so that gives you up to 6 stops of image stabilization. Great for shooting with a slower shutter speed if you want to get more light in there, so for low light sort of stuff, but also great for handheld video, which is actually a really nice thing, because this makes for quite a decent hybrid system, especially for kind of everyday, and specifically I think this would be great for travel. So if you go traveling, you want to take photos and video, this is going to be a nice system for that. So with that in-body image stabilization, you can pop on the digital image stabilization as well for video, just to give you some extra stabilization while filming. And that also works when you're walking around. So if you want to use this for a vlogging camera, there's a couple of reasons that's going to work well. Obviously the screen flips out and turns around so you can see yourself, but also with that digital image stabilization as well, when that's activated, it really does help to smooth out walking, which is really nice. In terms of video, you've got 4K up to 30 frames a second, so nothing crazy there, but I probably wouldn't expect much more than that from this kind of mid-range camera. You've got full HD though, up to 240 frames a second, which is actually really nice. That gives you some really creative ways to get some slow motion. I'd expect at least 120 frames a second, but 240 does give you a little bit of extra slow motion there if you want to play around with that. So like I say, 4K 30 frames a second, that's 8-bit 420 internal, and then you can do 10-bit 422 external. So you've got a little bit of flexibility there as well if you need it. To be honest though, I can imagine this being very popular with vloggers and content creators, because you get that really nice image. You can of course use the film simulations as well, but it's just very easy to use, easy to carry around, but still with a really good quality. Now, autofocus wise, of course, you've got face and eye detection in here, which actually seems to work really well, which is nice. But the main thing I noticed with autofocus, it's very, very quick. Snaps on, no worries. There's tracking in there as well, but I just didn't have any issues with it. So that's always a massive plus for me. I mean, obviously, right? But I think that that's such a key thing. If you know you can rely on the autofocus, that really takes a lot of the kind of stress of nailing a portrait or nailing a moment in an event or something like that out of the equation. You can rely on the autofocus, you can focus, you know, no pun intended, on the actual composition of the shot and the exposure. Now let's talk a little bit about the design and the feel of the camera as well, because this is a small compact body, like I've said a few times. It pairs really well with this 18 to 55 XF lens. But the main thing, or I say the main thing, the first thing that I really noticed when picking this up, it is incredibly comfortable to hold. This grip is very nice and deep. I've got quite big hands, so sometimes small cameras can be a bit of an issue. But this is incredibly comfortable. This is really, really nice to use. And then you've got very ergonomic placement of buttons. So obviously the shutter, where you'd expect. You've got a dedicated movie record button as well, which I always like. I always think that's really nice because that means you can switch between stills and video literally like that, just press a button. You've got an ISO button on the top there if you want to switch to actually changing the ISO with one of the dials, which I think is super good. I know that sounds like a tiny thing, but sometimes finding the ISO, where to change the ISO, can be a real pain. It can be a real pain. So I think it's really nice to have the dedicated ISO button and then just use the dial to switch that up. Q menu, of course. And then you've got a couple of dials to change, obviously, the mode you're shooting in. And then you've got a dial on the left, which you can use to change the film simulations really quickly and just using an actual dial without having to go into any kind of menu. Now, I found that meant that I would end up changing the film simulations a lot more just to try them out, just to experiment a little bit, because it was right there, super easy to just use. It meant that I would take a photo and then I think to myself, I wonder what this would look like in black and white. And I would just switch to the Across film simulation, take the photo, no issue at all. Very quick. I really appreciated that being on there. Now on the back, you've got a joystick with a couple of buttons. So it's a pretty minimal design in terms of the button placement, but it does feel pretty ergonomic. So for example, using the joystick to change the focus point, move things around like that, and of course the menus as well, feels really good. You can also click the joystick in to confirm, so to click OK rather than having to press a separate button, which is nice. So let's talk about the EVF and the screen. Now the screen I've mentioned a couple of times flips out, it flips all the way around. As you will know if you've watched other videos, I generally always prefer this over any other kind of screen. I just think it's very, very helpful. It makes it super easy to use the camera in, different situations. So up above, down below. If you want to shoot portrait but also get down low, you can have it like this so you can still see. Flip it round to really be able to see it in any angle, which it's just a big thing, I think. It just makes the shooting experience really, really pleasant if you're not using the EVF as much. Now the EVF does look good actually as well. Better than I thought it was going to, actually. I thought the EVF would be kind of, all right, but actually it was perfectly fine. I was able to use it for exposure, able to use it for all kinds of stuff, and it was nice and bright, which was the same as the screen, even in sunlight. Now admittedly it's autumn sunlight, but even in sunlight, I was able to see the screen no problem at all. So that's nice, that's a key thing I think. Now there's a magnesium alloy top plate and front plate, which is nice. It means it's kind of nice and rigid and robust. And it does feel like that. It feels like a good quality body, and then pair it with a nice lens and you've got a really nice setup there. So who do I think this is gonna be for? Well, content creators are gonna love this kind of thing because of the size of it, and the autofocus is really good and you can switch the screen around, so vloggers are gonna love it. It's great for hybrid shooters, photo and video, because it's got some nice video stuff in there without going too crazy. And then it's got some, obviously Fujifilm's got some nice, lovely colors. And then the film simulations, it's always fun to experiment with those. It's just, shooting with Fujifilm is such a pleasant experience, I would say. That's the main thing I always think with Fujifilm, and that's the same thing here. Anyone who wants to do something like travel photography, have an everyday carry around camera, you've got good resolution in there, decent low light performance as well. It's just a nice all-rounder camera that's going to be perfect for anyone who wants that kind of thing, an everyday camera, travel camera, anything like that. Now, if you have any questions about the camera or anything else at all, pop it all down in the comments. I'll spend some time with this, so I'll do my best to answer any questions that you have. Of course, I'll pop a link down in the description so you can go and check out the whole camera for yourself. So all the specs, the pricing. If you like the video, don't forget to like and subscribe. That always helps us out. I will, of course, see you in the next video. And as always, thanks for watching.